My name is Cesar Delgado, and I am presenting Cultural Identity and Digital Citizenship. How do social media consumers and creators reconcile their identities in the digital world? Uh, First and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Borim and the Office of Undergraduate Research for this amazing opportunity that most definitely challenged me and helped me grow as a student and as a researcher. And I also want to take the time to thank my faculty mentors for being very patient with me, as well as uh, always being available for any questions I had. Those mentors are Professor Andre Favors and Professor O'Brien Stanley. So the critical question to be answered at the conclusion of this project was, does ethnicity and or race change user experience in social media? If so, in what ways? My hypothesis from the beginning was ethnicity and or race does alter our experience in social media. Additionally, it obligates us to alter how we interact with others on social media as opposed to how we interact with those who are within our same ethno-racial group. And so my interest in this really started back in 2019, summer of 2019, whenever we started seeing uh, social media being used in a efficient way whenever it came to discussing social and political issues, especially those of and along the lines of race and ethnicity. Um, from my personal experience, I was able to pick out that a lot of themes and um, discussions were differing amongst different ethnic and racial groups. And so that is where my initial interest in this topic started. And it started building upon that whenever we started experiencing the most recent social political discussion on race with Stop Asian American Pacific Islander Hate in the last 2 years. So that is kind of not kind of it is the reason why I felt that this was an opportune time to undertake this project, and more so we could start understanding how our students at Lamar University, which are reflected in a large demographic of diverse demographic, uh, I was interested in seeing how us as Lamar University students are interacting with each other on social media along these lines. And we carried this out through uh, surveys. We felt that that was the best way to move forward. There was no complexities behind it as we designed our uh, survey. We designed it in a way to where we would talk about uh, racial discrimination, as well as access to technology, to determine if there was some type of digital gap that hindered our minority students to participate in these type of discussions to begin with. And so qualitative surveys were the way to go, and uh, I thoroughly enjoyed putting the survey together, and they yielded some very interesting results. So we did have a lot of responses. Personally, me, I shared the survey on my social media, and I had a lot of my colleagues share the this survey, and I received plentiful responses. Professor Stanley also supported me by sharing the survey with a couple of his students, and that increased the amount of responses we had. However, due to some minor uh, hiccups, you could say, we had to decrease the amount of these responses that we would synthesize, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But nonetheless, we received 35 total responses. Uh, and to consider a response as total or as valid, we filtered out submissions in which there were answers missing and or fields were left blank. So that is how we went through using the data. And any of those that, like I said, were not 100% complete, we didn't use. And 35 is a good amount, considering that we were dealing with qualitative data rather than quantitative data, and we were able to really see some themes and some interesting uh, insights as to our topic. And so I'll go through those in a little bit. Of these 35 responses, 19 respondents identified as non Hispanic white, while the other 16 were in a minority group, whether that be Hispanic white or Hispanic black, non Hispanic, biracial, non Hispanic black. Um, so we did have diverse set of respondents. So the study findings, the results were as follow. When it dealt with technological access, of the 35 respondents, 33 were able to count on a secondary device, regardless of ethnicity or race. And what we mean by that is that we asked people what device they were finishing this survey, and if they had access to anything besides that. Furthermore, access to technology throughout the students' academic careers was not a concern for most. And interestingly, the median age when a minority student gets their first technological device was lower compared to their non minority peers. And those numbers look like this: the median age of minority students was 13, while the age for their non-minority peers was 16. So this was an interesting part of this research to see that digital gap didn't really affect our minority students at Lamar University. You know, I'm optimistic that this is the case. I'm glad it doesn't. However, this digital gap did not count for uh, any that this lack of digital gap did not make up for racism or discrimination on it. Racism or discrimination on social media uh, that our minority students may have or have experienced. So that's kind of where we have a larger amount of data available, and the digital citizenship. And what we mean by digital citizenship is participation in social, political discussions online, as well as follower friending tendencies along racial lines. So the respondents who did follow along these lines, and by these lines we mean ethnic or racial lines, were mostly minority students who felt like they could relate to them more, and by them they mean those within their same group, or they wanted their feed to feel more inviting. In other words, they felt more comfortable following friendly people in their same ethnic and or racial group. Moreover, 46% of respondents agreed that the topics of discussion drastically differ between ethnic and or racial groups, specifically when it comes to current movements that deal with discrimination, as previously stated BLM and stop AAPI hate was those topics of discussion. On the same issue, there were also minority respondents that stated that when these types of conversations are had, they could count on accepting respectable and understanding friends, followers who do not belong to their group. So this was one particular finding that we weren't looking for, but we were more than glad to find out, and that's that our minority students can count on that type of support on social media. 89% of those who experienced some type of racial or ethnic discrimination were minorities or non minorities that support their peers, or as we call them, allies. Additionally, some of these respondents have experienced discrimination outside of social media, and one respondent told us about a case of them being harassed on social media because of going to a political event that was anti-racist. So, as seen here, uh, racism and discrimination do not evade some of our minority students. And we also see that whenever we talk about privacy settings. So many respondents do not feel the need to put their social media on private due to having already done this early on in their academic and professional careers. However, those that have had to do it are ethnic minorities, and they do this mostly for fear of judgment or even retaliation by a professor or an employer. In one case, a Hispanic respondent stated that she has always been private uh, because they have always dealt with some type of harassment, whether it be bullying in school or uh, another type of emotionally turbulent situation. So this was a lot of themes that we were able to see. As previously stated, we could not account for a digital gap, and I cannot stress it enough. We're glad that we don't have to worry about that. At least, as I said, here in Lamar University. Uh, but the findings have shown that the hypothesis from the beginning was true. We do have different social media experiences whenever we're minority students compared to whenever we're not minority students, more specifically along the lines of dealing with and experiencing racism and discrimination. But we were glad to be able to figure out through the survey that our students have an equal amount of support on social media, off social media, and that they're not going alone. They're not at it alone, rather. So that is very much the what we have as of right now. We look forward to working on this continuously until we finalize the study in fall, and we are very optimistic on that. Further responses will validate our current findings.